go.
This is the one where I saw it.
I'm going to call this zoning revision meeting on June 1st, 2022 to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Take it away, Dean.
So I apologize for missing everyone, but I didn't know if I had allergies or something worse. So rather than sitting here with a runny nose and sneezing, I figured I'd stay home.
Yeah, thank you.
But that being the case, I couldn't hear a lot of the conversations because we didn't come to the mic. So we need to come to the mic so that not only I can hear if I need to go back and get notes, but so that the audience that are listening can also hear and understand what's going on. So as a courtesy to everybody listening, let's please use the mics. With that being said,
Dean, can I make a suggestion if it's only Russ and Ray here at this
Yeah.
point?
Yeah.
And, I mean, once they introduce themselves to everyone, so everyone knows who's sitting
Yeah.
in the audience, why don't we, can we take that mic and do we have enough, oh, we got,
I don't think we can still do it.
we can put the mic between the three of them there, so at least, you know, I mean,
You can just pass it back and forth.
or something like that. I mean,
You only see the back of my head.
I mean,
if you don't mind, we'll leave it where it is then. We were just trying to make it easier for you. All right, so with that, before we get deep into the woods, I know that Elliot had given me some corrections. Were there any other corrections that needed to be made?
Not for me, no.
All right, and so one of the conversations that we had before going live here was between co-locator and whether it should be hyphenated or not. I mean, it is a proper word, so I don't know what we should do as far as leaving it or changing it, because then we have to go back and make the changes, even though I did in one section of the communications.
You mean the way it is now, it's a proper word, C-O-L-L-O?
Yeah,
I would just leave it in that case.
Yeah, I
Wouldn't
think
be
we can
easier-
leave it.
Wouldn't it be easier to leave it than change it?
I think it's easier to leave it.
Then just
I mean,
leave it.
Obviously, Neil or whoever
Yeah.
collected it from somewhere
Yeah,
that way, and,
right. Yeah, and then we don't have to change the other one. The co-location can stay the way it is,
right.
so.
Okay, so with that, we kind of left off with the commercial horse boarding, and I circulated to everybody on the board, as well as the people I regularly attend, right from the guideline review of the ag markets. And so the language is the language that the state has on their website as to what a definition of a farm operation is. And I understand, Ray, you had pointed out what's the difference if it has 10,000 or not. I understand where you're coming from. It's not a per se necessary for us, but this is a state definition as to what a commercial horse boarding operation or farm operation or any of these other definitions are. It's by ag markets. I would have problems really changing what the state has from their website. If we want to make things easier, we could do that within our own code, but as far as definitions go, I think we should follow what the state definition is.
I agree with that.
so are we going to leave it 7 acres and
My only, this is Ray Oberly, Fiddler's Bridge Road. My only comment to that statement of 10,000 is, for the assessor, for 7 acres or less, it's 20,000. Above
That's correct.
10 acres, it's, above 7 acres, it's $10,000. So I don't know if there's going to be any quandary if we get into the wrong number.
So then why don't we put on something on the end of it, or as whatever the qualification is by ag markets.
Or just pass it by.
Which would be section
pass it by the
301.
assessor so that there's no problem that comes up between the two situations. That's all I care about. However she wants to handle it.
Yeah, because if the state changes any of these things, I mean, obviously our definitions out of,
Oh, I understand that.
you know, so if we put on, or as changed by ag markets, section 301, I think we're kind of
Oh,
putting it,
that wasn't my issue. My issue was
oh, I understand,
assessment,
yeah.
Yeah, the financial side of it.
because they're getting a
I mean,
different
because
deal.
this came from 2012, so I mean, you know, if there's something new,
I don't think
had
there's
changed in
anything new.
between.
I don't think there was, but the problem is, if I raised, say, fancy garlic,
Mm-hmm.
okay, and I have 6.5 acres of it,
Mm-hmm.
I gotta have $20,000 of gross income from that,
Right,
versus a guy with horses doesn't necessarily have to have that.
right.
That's the deal I'm looking at.
Yeah, I mean, these two
They're almost
definitions,
entirely the same. Except for the part near the bottom about a farm operation.
yeah, the farm operation would be different, but as far as the commercial horse boarding or the commercial equine operation, they wouldn't change. So how do we want to address that? I mean, again, I think we should keep at least the minimum of what the state is saying in their definition. But if we want to put in a tag at the end of the sentence, or as AML 301 may change from time to time, I mean, or something like that.
You would do that for both definitions?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Because these definitions are really from them.
yes, right.
Russ Tompkins, Shellsville. Dean, I'm just a little concerned because I see the actual definition, and it's 7 acres, at least 10 horses. But then, and I hate to do this, I hate to go back, because we were supposed to make these definitions compatible with what we've already made changes throughout the zoning up to here. And we had changed it in 250-66 to more than 5 acres. I believe minimum lot size shall be 5 acres and board more than 5 horses. So I'm wondering if we're, by definition, making a different definition than what this section says. You follow what I'm...
No, I understand what you're saying, and
Contradictory.
I'm looking at one being the definition and two being what the town is allowing. And I believe that the town can make things easier for farmers, but we can't make it more difficult. Therefore, if we made it more stringent, let's say it was 5 and we want to make it 10, the likelihood is that we would get sued and we would lose. That's not a good thing. But if it was 10 and we want to make it 5 in our code, I think we're well within our bounds to do that, as long as we're not jeopardizing the health and welfare of the animals, which, we have to take in consideration. I believe that the state probably already looked at what's in the best welfare of the animal. They do tend to be less restrictive on farms overall, but they must have in their mind what should be the right percentage, horse per acre, requirements.
So, I don't have a problem with it being more lenient. I'm just looking at the two and saying, does that create a problem? The
No, I understand what you're saying,
current one I printed out that you had on there,
and we definitely want to harmonize as much of our code as possible.
so we're allowing it to be 5 acres, and the definition is saying at least 7 acres. And in our section that deals with it, we don't have any stipulation about money receiving $10,000.
Right.
So if you guys are good with it that way, I don't. I'm just pointing out that I thought that the two seem to be in a little conflict.
Well, I think the financial part with Ray's saying, that goes with any farm that's registered, that's getting the ag exemption would have to qualify for that amount. That's already with ag and markets. So I don't think that has to be restated into this. We can allow that. I think, Dean, I do agree with the fact, we can go less on that to the 5 acres. I mean, the question is, could they say, well, we have that for a reason because of the welfare of the horses? I guess they would have to come in and determine that, but it's not like we raised it to 10, and then the residents went and said, hey, you know, we have the ag, New York Ag and Marks as 7, and we went, you know, pushed it is unreasonable. But I think the financial thing is they can have it as 5, but they would have to show the profit if it's only 5 acres. It would have to be shown at the $20,000 threshold for the gross revenue sales regardless, because that's the definition by the state, under 7 acres. Does that mean, I guess,
All right, then, if I copied off the current one, B, following regulations shall apply to private stables that board up to 5 horses. If we go back to what I've got in the book, following shall apply to private stables. There's nothing about them boarding. That's like you having a stable on your property for your own personal horses. So I did print this out, Article 5 supplemental regulations, and I got down current revision because I got that off the computer. And it doesn't sound like, I mean, I don't think it was a private stable as somebody boarding it. It's your own personal use.
Yeah, I think by the definition of boarding, it should require that you're not being paid.
Well, I'm trying to say.
Boarding is when you do.
Where does it apply if you just have property and you have your own personal horses? And you're not boarding them? What regulations come under that?
Well, certainly not commercial, because it's no longer commercial.
or would that go back to, because the town does specify so many, as far as livestock on your property, a certain amount. It'd go back to that at that point, if it's not, non-commercial, it's residential,
Right,
and you're having.
I think so.
I think
I
it'd go
agree.
back in.
But a private stable would also apply to boarding other people's horses, as long as you're not making money off it. It doesn't specify that they have to be your own horses. You could board horses for your neighbor as a favor, and no money changing hands, it's still a private stable.
It's still a private city.
Yeah,
Iron Shank, Fiddler's
not
Bridge
to
Road.
confuse the issue anymore.
Sorry.
Go ahead. Yeah, sorry.
Maybe I'm going to confuse the issue more, but I sent an email to all of you how I thought that 66 had some large gaps in it, and I proposed a solution to close the gaps. To me, the focus really should be on 66, which is the town's regulation of keeping horses in Clinton. And I took private stables to mean it's your own horses. You're giving it a different definition. Either way you define it, there's a gap. We don't regulate all horse husbandry in the town the way 66 is now written. If you have a commercial operation with less than 5 horses, you're unregulated. And if you have a private stable, whatever that means, and you have more than 5 horses, you're unregulated. And I can't believe we would have done that on purpose. And it seems to me, Part A is more restrictive because it's commercial, I guess, and Part B is a little bit less restrictive in terms of regulation. And what I would have said is anyone who has, if you're boarding for third parties and you're more than 5 horses, you're in A. Everybody else who has horses is in B, whether it's your own horses, whether you're doing a favor to your neighbor, whether you're making money, not making money. You're still regulated more loosely if it's a smaller operation, but there's still regulation that applies. We don't want your manure in the wrong place, right? We want some distance between your property line and the buildings that are housing horses. So the suggestion I sent in my email 2 weeks ago, I would suggest we consider for 66, and then I get less concerned about the definitions, the 2 commercial definitions.
So you're saying it should be based on number, rather than on whether it's for-profit or private?
Well, what I wrote was if you're commercial and you're more than 5 horses, which I took to mean you're charging other people money to board their horses. That's what I interpreted that to
Right.
mean.
Right. But,
And if it's anybody else, it's subject to the less restrictive. Most people won't have personal horses, won't have a lot of them, right? That's, I would think, pretty unusual, so I'm not too worried about them, but they should still be regulated.
but should they be regulated the same way or not?
Well, I think they should be regulated the same way in B, which is still a regulation, that's just a little bit looser. Now, we could debate if there's you could change A and B to just be based on number of horses.
Well,
Say
that's
more
what
than
I-
5 horses, you get the
Right.
restrictive regulation.
Right.
Less than 5, you get the loose. That would work too. Then we don't even use those defined terms anymore.
Right.
I think this is the only place they're used, other than permitted uses.
Right.
They're there. That would drop away the use of the defined terms in section 66. I'd be okay with that too. I think,
Could I ask you a question about your draft, where you said?
Russ,
You gotta get up.
come closer to the mic so everybody can hear you, please.
And then they can see it too.
Yeah, I'm looking at Ian's draft, and I have a question for him, because it seems that two things confuse me. For instance, on commercial, number 2, no building or enclosure. What do you mean by enclosure?
building has a definition, which does not cover all structures. And so if it's something, for example, with a roof but no sides, I think it wouldn't be a building. I thought it just missed some types of, or tent. You keep horses in a tent, I think it should be restricted.
I was defining it to be the fenced-in area, the enclosure. And that, then down below on 4, it just says all outdoor areas shall be enclosed by fencing, which is fine with me. You don't want the fence, obviously 200 feet from the property line. So that enclosure, I'm saying, well, it's enclosed by a fence,
I agree with you. It should be a fence or a tent or a building without sides, all those things should be regulated. You don't want to make it to someone else's property.
Okay, but the fenced-in area, be it a paddock or pasture, doesn't have that stipulation on it. It doesn't fall under 2.
Well.
It falls under 4.
Let's say define enclosure. I think your point is well taken. Enclosure should be fenced-in area or a building or a structure, any of the above.
So it sounds like you're going exactly opposite what I'm looking for. Fenced-in area.
That's not unusual.
Fenced-in areas and number 4, all outdoor areas shall be enclosed by fencing or other means sufficient to confine horses to premises.
I
So
think-
there's no distance there, and like I said,
Yeah.
if you go up the road here to the horse farm, I think 10 feet from your property line is more than sufficient for a fenced-in area or a paddock.
Russ wants to differentiate between the horse's pasture, which the fence may be closer to the road or the property line, as opposed to a barn or a shed that you may want to say is set back more from both of those things.
Well, I
I
guess
think
my-
that's where he's headed.
Now I understand, thank you. But then I guess I don't understand why make a difference. Why should it be different? To me, this is not about protecting horses, it's about respecting other property owners' rights to quiet, no smells. Maybe they don't like horses, and they just don't, someone's home could be right up against their property line, or right very close to it, and then there's horses 10 feet away. I don't think that's right. I think they should be set back.
Yeah, I'm
Well-
going to play devil's advocate and say, that's my land, why can't I fence it in for my dogs or my pigs or my whatever, you know what I mean?
I think the only way I could accept this is that number 2 would be no building, leave out our enclosure. No building in which horses are kept, and I think 200 feet is excessive, as I do think down below for the private ones, 100 feet is excessive, even for the building.
I think there's two things. One, it goes back to the old thing is if you buy a house next to an airport, you expect to hear planes. But the question is, if there was no farm next to you originally when you bought, and you kind of buy it and saying, okay, there's farms in town, and I recognize that, but all of a sudden, there's a piece of property that's going to become a farm, how do I have protections as an adjacent property owner?
I think we need to back up a second and go to the larger question, because we opened up this question, I believe
up
Elliot
Pandora's
did.
box.
Are we going to continue to differentiate between commercial and private? So I think that's the first question we need to answer, and then we can move on, because
If you have a number of horses, you have a number of horses, whether it's commercial or private, they require the same amount of care. So that would suggest that it should be done on the basis of the number of horses rather than whether it's profit-making or not profit-making venture.
That's true.
No?
I'm fine with that. I think that makes sense.
I'm good with that.
It would simplify it for sure. I'm a little concerned about the backyard horse owner but I think even the commercial rules that we have or that I can imagine we'll come out with are not that restrictive, so I don't think it would be a problem.
Backyard horse owner is not likely to have more than 5 horses, if that's our, right, if that's our cutoff.
Ray Oberly again. I know this is history. None of you were in office at the time. But in the second version, I think, of the zoning law in 1980 or 79 or 74, I forget the exact year. Okay. The original law was proposed to have fences considered structures and said that all structures comply with the 50, 100, 200, whatever the setbacks were. I says, the farmers are going to be in rebellion, okay, because first of all, they're paying taxes on land that they can't use. Now, so we got them out of being structures. So the setback requirements for them were non-existent, other than reasonable so that the snowplow doesn't plow them down when it goes down the road.
And sight distance issues.
Well, not sight distance. This
Well, I'm
is-
saying for intersections, you can't have a fence to block the sight distance.
Oh, no, this is farm pasture
I understand.
fencing, which is holes and wires and stuff like that. So that is very important, okay? Because you're going to be paying money on land that you have no ability to use. And I would expect someone to take us to court, and they will win as being an inappropriate confiscation of their land without them being able to do anything on it. So fencing, because when you say fencing for horses, you're not going to have a different set of fencing for horses, cows, pigs, or whatever, okay? They're all going to be the same, because a fence is a fence. Now, if you wanted to be so precise, I think you're going to get in a lot of trouble, especially if you go to court saying you've forced one class of people to have a problem with that. The situation of people moving in from airports and all, I've been through all this. I know houses that were built 50 feet from the sideline. The farmer who had the pasture right aside of that was spreading manure, and the guy got all upset. Okay, I was in office. Got all upset. I says, hey, the guy's a dairy farmer. He's been in business for 50 years. He's got to recycle the manure to keep the pastures growing so he can keep his cows and make his money on dairy and all. So, you know, I don't know why he did 50 feet. I mean, he owned lots of land. Why he picked that number, I wasn't privy to it. I don't care, but don't raise a complaint because of that. So, you know, if you're going to encourage farming, don't put these heavy restrictions of big setbacks on fences or saying you can't spread manure because it'll stink. So be sure you try to not get that trouble coming
Right.
forth.
No, that's a good point.
Just to be clear, it clearly does restrict use of land for horses, but it doesn't restrict it for growing any kind of crops. So the this different space between the fences and the property line, I believe, is unrestricted in terms of everything else the farmer would grow. So the land is still usable, just not for horses, and I don't know what other animals, pigs or whatever, but, you know, there are other uses beside horses.
It's just going to be a continuing, he said, but if you go up past the horse farm, just above us, Stickles Goat Farm, it's a, I think, a wonderfully run operation. I see no problem with it. I would estimate those fences are 10 feet from the edge of the road. So there is an example you can look at and say to yourself, is there any problem here? And in my mind, there is no problem there, you know? So, anyway, I think that you should remove enclosure if you're gonna go with Ian's proposal here. And I will also say that the thing that Dean put out for us by the agricultural markets, I found this interesting, under minimum lot size A. A town's limitation on the number of horses allowed per acre could be unreasonably restrictive. The department considers, among other things, the impacts on a particular farm operation to determine if a density limitation is unreasonably restrictive. And this is the important part. If a pasture is to be used for subsistence, I mean, they're going to graze and live on it, then 1 acre of pasture per horse is usually appropriate. If the lands are used for a turnout area, I call that a paddock or corral area, then 5 or more head may be carried on 1 acre of land. I think that should be addressed in private stables where we have that you have to have 2 acres for the first horse and 1 acre for every horse after. If you're feeding your horses boughten hay every day and feed, you don't need 1 acre, and you sure as hell don't need 2 acres for the first horse. Town of Stanford, if I remember, they said you have to have 1 acre to have horses, but they don't mention how many horses are on the acre. That's just another jump in the mud puddle.
Ray Oberly again. The 2 acre per horse, when that came about, was to allow land for a barn or a run-in shed or something for these animals. So that said, they can't stay outside year-round, okay? They have a sheltered place to go. Call it a run-in shed, call it a paddock area. That they have a run-in shed. So the horse, 1 horse per acre, but then they put 1 acre, so you had a building to put it on, put them in. So that's where the 2 number came from. And that's back in the 1990s or 80s.
All right,
So
but,
that's where that came from.
okay, well, thank you.
And the other thing is, you said, oh, you only use fields for pasture? No. After a while, you go and you replant them with alfalfa, or you put corn in or something to rejuvenate the field. And at that time, that farmer is losing that 10, 20, 200 feet along the edges of his fencing because he's not ripping the fence down to do the plowing and all of that. So I maintain that the fences go as reasonably close to the property line or road as practical, leaving enough room for roadside mowing, snow plowing, and stuff of that nature. But to arbitrarily force them all to be back 50, 75 feet and all, you take a big field, that's lots of money that the guy pays in taxes on land that he can't do anything with, except mow it and make it look good. So I think there's a problem with being too restrictive on some of this stuff.
So,
But the setbacks we're talking about don't apply to fences, they apply to buildings.
Well, but Russ is concerned that it's not clear that they don't
that if we
apply
say
to fences.
enclosure could include a turnout area or a pasture or,
So then why don't we define the structure,
Well, in A,
the
we,
structure enclosure.
the enclosure?
in A, instead of using those terms, we just said no building in which horses are kept. So can we use the
Right.
same wording for that
Yeah,
down below?
You could say, you mean no stable building shall be located, blah, blah, or whatever. Just leave that enclosure.
Yeah.
That's the issue, why not?
Did we answer the question on whether we're combining the commercial and private?
no,
Not exactly.
Okay. Because I see Ray's point about, an acre per horse if they're out there grazing, but if you're
But if-
feeding them
but if
if
you're
you're feeding them in the barn every night, then you don't necessarily.
I mean, out of curiosity, in the town, our residents that do have horses, are they letting them mostly graze or they feed? I mean, I guess that's a question, just
You need
a
a-
hypothetical question in theory.
Well, think about it. So you have to have, the Ag and Marcus is saying an acre horse. I'd say that's probably low. If you want
The acre,
to
you're
not,
saying the-
if you want to not feed that animal, I think you need more than an acre per
Okay.
horse. So I think
Well,
the
that's if you're
majority
using
of,
grazing.
right, the majority of people that, in the town of Clinton are supplementing at the very least, if not completely feeding their horses other food.
And especially
Well,
during the
that-
winter.
In the winter, there's,
Have to.
everybody does, but,
So-
you know, this time of year, I can't think of a farm that has enough pasture
To allow the,
to not feed more to their, something
Supplement the
else to their
feeding.
horses, yeah. Russ?
I think that what I printed out here is current, that came off the computer, is sufficient, except that it's excessive in the distance the building should be from property lines. But it
Which
just,
document are you talking about, Russ?
well, I printed this off, this was.
Which document?
Article, Chapter 250 zoning, Article 5 supplemental regulations, 250-66.
66, okay.
Apparently what we approved.
Right.
Okay? The following regulations apply to commercial horse boarding and the commercial equine that board more than 5 horses.
Mhm.
Okay? It deals with lot size for commercial being 5 acres minimum. It says no building should be closer than 200 feet, which I think is excessive. Talks about animal waste, stockpiling, storage of manure is not permitted unless provision has been made to ensure leachate. The section from AML says that you can spread it on the property. It has several things on the agricultural markets law that you can do with it. And it just says all outdoor areas shall be enclosed by fencing to confine the horses to premises. That's the intent of anything. And then B basically is doing the same thing, except that only thing is you've lowered the distance for a stable building or enclosure to be 100 feet, which again, I think is excessive. But I think you should stick with the current one that we have in place.
I do think the first question is how you want to decide how you're regulating, horse operations. What's written now in 66 leaves 2 gaps in the regulation, which I just, again, do not believe was your intent, to leave 2 categories of horse operations unregulated completely. That's what the existing words would do. And I think I agree with Elliot. The simplest thing is just say if it's less than X horses, it's simpler regulation. If it's more than X, you get more restrictive regulation. I think that should be your first decision, in my opinion, to make, how you want to regulate, how you want to divide up horse farms from a regulatory perspective. And then we can move to how many acres and how many feet from the lines. But until you answer the first question, you can't really address intelligently the rest of it.
But wouldn't that also, if that were the case, when we get into structure of, schedule of uses, we differentiate between,
Yes,
Public
clearly,
and
whatever,
private.
if we have to deal with scheduled uses when we get there, I
there
assume
would be
that
no
hasn't been addressed yet.
differentiation if
No.
you're treating them the same.
I'm sorry?
If you're treating them the same, then there's no differentiation in the schedule of uses between public and private.
Commercial
Well,
and
why
private,
couldn't
yeah.
we carry the, why couldn't we
commercial and
carry,
private.
why couldn't, if we were to change it from commercial to private into a rubric of number of animals, why couldn't we carry that rubric to the schedule
Oh,
of
yeah,
uses?
absolutely. We just have to remember to do that when the time comes, yeah.
Because I do think that if you were to do the number of horses, you'd catch most commercial operations just by that, doing that,
Right.
right? Most commercial operations are gonna have more than
Right.
a few horses, so,
And most private ones will have fewer
right.
than 5. Yeah, I think that makes sense. So 66 would have to be redone.
If that's where we want to go. And then, does that
If
mean
that's
that
the
we don't have to come up with these definitions either?
I don't
Because-
even think we'd need a commercial horse boarding operation definition.
Right,
Schedule permitted uses, they show up there.
right, but we were just talking about if we change this,
Change the whole thing.
then we're going to carry it through to schedule of uses, because otherwise, we're apples and oranges. Right.
So,
So that would certainly simplify things.
Question to you, Ray, is that under this November 2010 Farmland Protection Plan that we put together for the town, it says agricultural assessment for 7 acres may qualify, but the average gross sales must be 50,000, not 20.
That's a lot.
So, I mean, we've been looking at 250, chapter 250, but we also have this other document within our town called the Farmland Protection Plan. And so when we change things in one, we do affect the other as well.
Now they're
Oh,
going to
yeah,
contradict
there's
each
a
other.
lot of interrelationships between things, I agree.
But Dean, does the farmland protection plan differentiate between?
Well, it's
commercial-
saying 7 acres well, $10,000, and then, I mean, here, you can take a look at it, but, yeah, it does match the AML code that I had sent, but it does specify if it's 7 acres, that it has to be 50,000, not 20.
But it doesn't
But what-
specify what kind of operation,
doesn't
right?
differentiate
Any
between
agriculture.
commercial and
I just
private.
took a quick look at it.
Okay.
Because I had the book with me.
Right.
The other interesting thing, when you're popping up with these numbers, normally those numbers are not available to a zoning enforcement officer.
Yeah, but
They're by the assessor because that's the rule
Right.
to get your exemption.
But that one,
So
that
how
wouldn't
is
affect
the
us.
assessor, I mean, the ZBA guy or ZEO or whatever you want to, ZEO or whatever you want to call them, going to be able to get access to these numbers?
But he doesn't have to know.
Yes, it says that they got to have $10,000.
But in terms of the zoning, all he's got to know is the number of horses that are being kept.
No, not if you have $10,000 in there. That's a criteria, so you've got to be able to measure that. So you got to be careful where you're going with some of that.
Well, we could, again, we could say $10,000, a minimum of $10,000, or as per AML 301.
Why would that be a zoning issue?
Because if they only have, not $10,000 or whatever the number you want to talk to,
Right.
say they have $1,000 less than that number, now, he's not in compliance with what the zoning says you're supposed to have.
Would have
But
the
if we do
exemption.
what we were just talking
If it's
about,
based on number, then it should.
then we're going to take commercial equine operation definition out,
Exactly,
and it's a moot point.
exactly, that's what I'm
Yeah,
saying.
I'm not arguing, I'm
Not very
just
well,
saying,
but that's what I was
normally,
getting at, too. Yeah.
the zoning enforcement officer doesn't get
Right.
that information or access to it. Now, the attorney may say I'm wrong, but in all the years that I've been dealing with this stuff, we never dealt with that. That was always the assessors.
Right.
And by law, she has access to
Right,
that because
right,
you're trying to
right,
get a
right.
ag exemption or,
Yeah.
Right.
or old age reduction in
Right.
exemption or
But
whatever.
The last idea we were talking about removes that piece about how much, what their gross receipts are.
Oh, yeah.
So then it's,
Yeah, I'm
It's not
just pointing out a problem if you do that.
right.
And
Well, we don't need commercial equine operation either, and that, they both come out, right?
That's the point.
Right.
One of the points.
Right.
And maybe one of the merits of the idea.
so when we changed what the code 25066 said, it only addressed public stables or riding academies. And in it only had A through D as a qualifier, which the 5 acre was the minimum size. There also was the setback of 200 feet already in there, even though you don't like the fact that it seems like we've made it more restrictive. It was already there. And it also says manure storage shall be covered and contained to prevent leaching, so, and within 200 feet of any other public water supply. So those things were already in there. What we did when we made the new 25066 is we combined what the new code and language of the ag markets was, which was renaming it the commercial horse boarding and commercial equine operation, to bring it up to the current, standards of what ag markets was using. And then the private stables was also left on there. And then we broke it into 2 sections, which was A and B, with the following regulations, which only applied for the commercial horse boarding and commercial equine boarding versus what it would be for the private stables. And so we expanded what the code 25066 was from its original, and now combined with a couple of things and separating them by an A and B category. And so, Russ, when you say we should leave it the way it was, it would still be restrictive of 200 feet, but it also wouldn't address some of the other things. I wouldn't want to necessarily go back to the old way of doing it. Let's fix what we have here so that it's palatable for everybody.
If we were to not follow the ag and markets wording and not have commercial horse or equine operations in our code, would there be any issues with that, as long as our definitions are less?
Well, should we use the word that they have in the book, which is public stable? I mean, then we would have to define public stable.
I'd rather go with the number
already
of
do.
animals. I think that takes, but I'm concerned if this document exists and we have to live by this, and then we have to live by that, are we creating more of a problem by taking those out? Or is it okay?
Again, I'm okay with making the definition even smaller and say, refer to Ag Markets 301 and be done, rather than doing any of these definitions, to be honest with you. Because then, again, as it changes by the state's requirements, we don't have to constantly update, our code. So I'm into simplifying it.
So you would suggest in the beginning, instead of having commercial horse boarding and equine operations of 250-66, just say refer to? and
No,
then-
I would leave, because that's the code, that's not the definition, right? So,
Oh, for the definition, you would just
for
refer
the
to?
definition, I would
Okay.
just say
So
refer
what would
to.
you do with, we have a definition for private stable and also for public stable. What would we do with those?
Well, no, I would keep
those?
the commercial horse boarding and commercial equine operation the way it is, because that's what
Definitions.
250-66 is.
Okay.
So then we have to define what commercial boarding and commercial equine and private stables are
I see, okay.
to match what the code is.
I see.
But I would be fine with simplifying it by saying there are minimum standards as per New York State AML 301 and 305, and maybe blurt out some of those items, but not be more specific than that.
Dean, this is what I printed off, is this our current one?
Yes.
Okay, I just hit another problem with it.
The current one is very short, Russell. There's only 4.
Let's be clear, too, there's no definition of private stables right now.
Yeah, there is. Under stable, comma, private.
Oh,
Stable
Michael, come on.
never mind.
You gotta check both, because you never know.
And also stable, comma,
If we're
public.
gonna use
But
this
whatever.
current one that we've revised, the most recent revision, commercial horse boarding, that board more than 5 horses. 1, the minimum lot size shall be 5 acres. Okay, they board more than 5 horses. So theoretically, they could have 10, and it says the minimum lot size shall be 5 acres. There is no continuation of that phrase like you did down for private, saying additional acre for each horse. So that A section, minimum lot size shall be 5 acres, and they're boarding more than 5 horses, but then there's nothing else that says how much they got to increase when they go above 5 horses.
Do we want to get into that, or?
No, I don't think so, because the agricultural markets law says that they can have as many as 5 horses on an acre if they were providing sustenance for them for feed.
Right.
So if you're going to go along with that, then I think that you're being
The minimum-
overly restrictive.
Again, the minimum just says what the minimum is. It doesn't say what's required per horse.
Yeah, it's saying the minimum lot size. It doesn't say that's the enclosure where the horses are.
Right.
The minimum lot
His
size is
point
5
that-
acres.
But it says
I know.
that in
So they have
private,
20 horses. Is that okay on 5 acres?
Seems like a lot.
but in private, it states that you have to have more, and in public, it doesn't.
Well, we can
That's
fix
his point.
private when we get to private.
Well, private B.
I still,
Minimum of 2 acres shall be provided for the first horse, and 1 additional acre shall be provided for each additional horse. So, I mean, if you had 10 acres for private, you need 10 horses, you need 11 acres. And you'd only need 5 for the commercial.
I'm wondering, and I don't know this for sure, if when this was written, they were assuming that commercial operations had the means to provide grain and feed for them, so they didn't have to pasture, and they were assuming that private operations, because you're not making money off of it, give them more acreage so they can pasture them.
Well,
I-
I had
It's
two
only an
horses, and I
assumption.
was
I mean,
buying a
that
lot of
might
hay
be-
and feed for
I
them.
mean, a way of thinking now, I mean, we don't know their intent, but I mean,
Yeah.
might make sense.
But it's still odd that
Your
it's
private
defined
is
in one
much more
place.
restrictive than the commercial, property-wise,
Right.
you know, and I mean, that just doesn't seem,
Yeah, the difference would be 6 acres versus 5.
no, I said if you could have, in the commercial, you could have 5 acres, and it doesn't say you can't have 10 horses on it.
Right.
But then the private says you gotta have 2 acres for the first horse and an acre for every one, so
So
if you had
private's only up to 5, so that's 6 acres at the max.
that board up to 5, what about your own personal ones? You're not boarding your own personal ones.
But if we,
This just gets muckier and
if we get
muckier.
rid of the distinction and just go based on the number, then all these issues go away because they're treated the same. We have one set of rules that apply to all of these operations, regardless of whether they're one kind or another. We have a minimum lot size and a number of horses per acre or what have you, but they're the same rather than having different standards for the two.
If you guys are making sense of it, I'm getting more confused as I go.
I mean,
So
we could just
you-
take out all of B.
Yeah. And then make A for commercial and private and
And public,
adjust
yeah.
1 through 4 to a way that we all accept.
So then you're saying, if you take away B, then you're saying the minimum lot size is 5 acres, that's for, doesn't matter who got the horses.
No, we would adjust it. What we're saying
You
is
still
that
need to,
instead of defining
formula.
commercial versus private, we're just going to
Right.
have one set of rules for all stables,
Right.
and that the rules will vary based on the number of animals. So if you have less than 5, we'll do one thing, if you have more than 5, it'll be another.
Where are we gonna
That
do
has
that?
to be reworked.
well, we'd have to redo.
Because if you go to the, I think it's called, I don't know what it's called, agriculture or something, there's a definition there, and it says, it includes raising animals other than household pets. And it says you have to have 3 acres to do that.
Yeah, I mean, if you go into the use schedule, it shows, depending on what animal, what's required.
No, your definition under
I know, but under the use schedule, it does list which animals, small versus large.
Chicken, pig,
Right.
cows. Okay, if you're looking at schedule of use, animal husbandry, that's the term I was looking for. Animal husbandry allows it basically everywhere's where you have 3 acres. In other words, AR3, you got 3, AR5, you got 3, but MR1, CR1, and residential hamlet and hamlet, it says permitted 3 acres. So animal husbandry includes raising these animals, okay? But then when you go over to, if you go to commercial horse boarding, it just says permitted all the way through. I don't see any indication of lot size. And it's even more disturbing is when you go to private stable. Now, remember, animal husbandry, you're allowed to do it with 3 acres. When you go to private stable, it says that in the same place that it said 3 acres, it now says you need special permit with 5 acres. And it's like, well, wait a minute, so I can have the animal, but I can't build anything for them to go inside as a stable, because then I need a special permit in 5 acres, and I've only got 3 acres.
Well, after we do the definitions, we're going to be redoing the schedule of use,
So
so.
hang on to that.
So
to
basically,
that
what
idea.
what we need to do is we need to revise 66 and have 2 sections, one section applying to 5
More than
or
5.
fewer, and the other more than 5.
Right.
That's what we have to do.
I think that makes, and then we can simplify the definitions
Yes.
and,
Unless this is clear to you folks on the elevation here, my suggestion would be that you confer on this and come up with a new definition or proposal for for the next meeting, because we spend way too much time on one topic.
Sorry.
That's what we're here for.
Anybody
Spend a
want,
lot of time on one topic.
anyone want to volunteer in tackling this?
I'll give it a try.
You'll give it a shot? Thank
Yeah,
you.
and you can shoot it down.
Yeah.
We can
Well,
beat
if
you
we
up.
don't, they will.
Somebody will. I mean, basically, just going to work with what's here.
Yeah, and I would
Yeah.
use the, Ag and Markets is a good guide for as far as acreage, I think.
So, I mean, also another thing I personally printed out, but I didn't share with everybody else is something that I'll give to you, Elliot, since you're going to work on it, which is
Yeah, I'll trade you.
it's a determination eligibility agricultural assessment, commercial horse boarding, breakdown with draft.
Sorry.
This is getting to be a little bit more than I,
So for your reading enjoyment,
Oh, brother.
I'll give you my, my document.
is it too late to withdraw my
No.
offer?
And we'll apologize to Cynthia now.
No, I'm stuck with it? Okay, whatever.
Mouth, insert foot.
Yeah, there you
All right,
go.
so let's table commercial horse boarding,
Right.
private boarding,
Yeah.
equine.
Okay.
How about commercial recreation here, amusement facilities?
Anyone? It's never been changed.
I think we can live with that one, no?
You're looking eager to jump up.
Yeah.
Okay, now, come on, up.
Commercial use, let's do it.
Commercial use.
Basically, a typo in commercial use. The heading is, as I understand it, business and commercial uses is the actual heading. So I would just change commercial in quotes to quote, business and commercial uses, end quote. It's just proper reference.
So add in after commercial use, business.
Is that what it says in the schedule
so
of uses?
under
Look
the
at the
heading.
schedule of uses. What I saw was business and
Business
commercial
and
uses.
commercial uses. End quote.
So in the definition where it says those uses listed under the heading,
It should match.
business and commercial uses.
Are you talking about changing the term or in the definition?
Both.
Just in the definition.
Yeah, right.
Oh, in the definition?
Yeah.
Okay, fine, all right.
Just so it matches.
Okay,
Well,
I figured you
are we
wanted
gonna
to
go and
make
look
things
at vehicle
complicated.
commercial now, or will we wait till we get to the Vs?
We're changing the heading to business and commercial use.
I don't think he was talking about that. I think he just meant in referring to it, that it should say business and commercial. Ooh, sorry, my bad. As it does in the schedule.
Next one?
Which one?
But if it says it's that way, then we should
Communications
name
antenna.
it
Yeah.
that way.
Are we doing?
Yes.
Oh, we're not doing commercial
No, no.
vehicle?
The second line, it says transmitting and receiving, but then skip down two definitions to communications facility commercial, and it says transmit and/or receive. I would suggest they both just be or. But they should be, at a minimum, they should be the same, in my opinion.
I'm sorry, which heading are we under?
Communications.
Antenna commercial and then facility commercial.
Antenna commercial, it should be transmitting or receiving, not and receiving. Right?
And then the next one, same thing. Transmit
And then-
and/or receive.
Yeah, under facility, communications facility commercial, it could be
Well,
transmit.
how?
Should it be and or in both?
Hey, Ian, also,
And/or is fine.
What
I
about the
just
first
don't-
one?
I mean, I'm fine with and/or,
what
but
about under antenna?
same. I mean, they should be the same. in
They're
my
Should
Sure.
both, I think they should both be and
No.
or.
Right,
and so-
and/or is
Three of
fine, gets to the same place.
There's one above it, too. Under antenna where it says transmitting and receiving.
Yeah, that's where we started with it. And then we went down to that one.
But then there's there's three altogether.
But the middle one says and/or already.
Is that what we're going to say, and/or? Fine, okay.
Oh, well, it's actually a different subject, but still.
So then the one should be changed to and/or, is what you're saying, and leave the other two alone,
That's fine with me.
right?
Yes.
Okay.
I could not find commercial communications co-location anywhere. Someone else can find it, great, but I couldn't find it in use. Start looking. Okay, but the cell tower law doesn't
I'm just saying,
Yeah, okay.
that's where collation facilities
I haven't read
Is
that.
that in the,
These definitions only apply to the zoning
I
rules.
was going to say,
yeah,
so,
it only applies to 250?
right, so
Are we taking it out if it's not there?
if it appears nowhere else in the zoning
Well, there
law,
are a couple of cases where we decided to leave them even though they're not referred to, as I recall.
I never favor leaving things in that have no relevance because it confuses people.
Well, we only need to define things that are in.
I agree. So if it's not being used, in my opinion, it should be deleted to avoid.
Wasn't there a case last week where we decided to leave something even though it's not
Well,
mentioned?
I think it's, the one particular item was something that's regularly used as building envelope.
Maybe that was it.
We use the term often in the building department, so I didn't think it was a problem with leaving it in, because it is a word that we use often.
Yeah, I don't remember.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't see where it's used either.
So we want to delete which?
Communications, co-location, comma, commercial. Who knows how long it's been there.
And then the same comment, communications repeater, comma, commercial, I couldn't find either. Maybe you want to double check me also, Mike, on that
Yep.
one? But I couldn't find that.
I only find it in the definitions.
Yeah, but realizing that sometimes your things are reversed, do we say take it out?
Yeah, because I'm searching for, I didn't even use the word commercial, I just searched for communications repeater in quotes, like those two words together, and it doesn't come up.
How about if you search for repeater by itself? Does anything show up? Just to be on the safe side?
That's essentially what you put at Franmark Park for your wireless, a repeater.
I mean, a repeater is mentioned, but it's not capitalized anywhere. 5105.
And there may be other.
That's the definitions, of course.
Oh, yeah, sorry, that's definitions, yeah.
Okay.
And commercial communications facilities, a repeater is mentioned, but I don't think it bears a definition.
Communication tower? It already says and/or.
Do we know where it is? Where it's mentioned?
Which one? What are we talking
Oh,
about?
I'm sorry. The repeater thing.
It's mentioned in 25044.
Yeah. You don't have that's, okay. You don't have a,
The word comes up twice in 25044.
is it important enough
Is it
to,
significant?
is it important enough? That's why I'm asking if you,
No,
that
it's,
doesn't tell you where it shows up, though.
hold on, I'm getting there.
Oh, okay, all right.
B1, this section regulates the installation and use of all commercial communications facilities, including but not limited to cellular towers and antennas, accessory buildings, and repeaters. It's used a second time somewhere, but heck if I can find it. Ah, there it is. 6C. Commercial communications facilities shall be restricted to antennas or repeaters on existing structures such as buildings, telephone poles, church steeples. I mean, a repeater is, I don't know.
Is this where you're talking? No,
I don't know that it,
no, I'm sorry, I'm looking at the wrong place. What was it again? I'm sorry.
25044.
Yeah. but
6C.
regardless of the fact that repeater's in there, it's not
Oh,
the
it might
whole
be.
phrase, so I really don't see why we need to
C6
keep
maybe?
it.
Hold on.
I'm sorry, she doesn't have it now. Let's see.
D6C.
Okay, there we go. Okay, D6. C. Okay. No, I'm not seeing it, sorry. D6C. It's not
I
there,
have no idea.
yeah.
Keep it, delete it.
I'd get rid of it. I don't think it,
I vote
the two
delete.
places it's used is,
Okay. Community facility? Anyone? Compatible?
Pretty generic. Also,
No one? Comprehensive plan?
Are we
Conceptual plan?
compatible with staying in?
You're going backwards now.
Did I miss that? I missed it. I'm sorry. I missed what you said.
No, I mean.
Are there any comments on any of these items?
Oh, okay.
Conceptual plan,
Going once,
conference center,
going twice.
conservation advisory council.
Which ones of these communication things did we take out?
We took out the repeater one.
make a note, though, that when we get, if we change
And the
the,
co-location.
when we change the equine operations, it's referred to in the conference center definition, so we have to make sure that it jives. Just make a note.
You got that note?
Where is that?
What's that?
It's in the conference center,
Conference
equine operation.
Commercial equine operation and a commercial horse boarding operation are all
Yeah, we wouldn't find that if we search, because it's just been added.
in conference center, so
No, conference center's always been there, but,
Yeah.
I think it will be
but
fine,
it's
because
in the
they'll
added part.
probably title that section this, and it will include it, but let's just remember,
well, it's.
Yeah,
make sure
and they're not
it matches.
capitalized in that definition,
right?
which means
they
you
sh-
wouldn't be looking in the definitions for them.
Right, which is,
So they would have to
Good.
be, they should be.
No, because we're going to remove those definitions,
Oh, we are.
remember?
I
so
thought
that
we were
works,
gonna keep-
is
okay.
Michael's point.
So, got it.
Ian, what did you come up for?
Constrained land?
Yes, it is constrained.
Yeah. Minor, very minor comment, I would just delete in the first line, parcel or. Lot is defined to mean parcel, and parcel is not defined.
So we're just taking out parcel and
Take out
just lot.
parcel or.
Okay.
I just want to add one more word back at comprehensive plan on page 16.
You gotta come to the mic, Ray. Comprehensive plan.
Back you up, just add one word, just so people understand. Ray Oberly, on comprehensive plan, it says the comprehensive plan of the town of Clinton sometimes also, and I was going to say previously referred to as the master plan, because that's what it was in the old days, before they changed it to comprehensive plan, that's all. I just wanted the word previously so people knew. It's sort of the same kind of thing.
Where you at, Ian?
Contractors, storage, accessory use.
Yeah.
The last sentence, I didn't understand. I get the first sentence, it's something a building that contractors use to store their stuff. But then the last part says, such accessory use shall also apply to other than contractors. Well, if I read that correctly, the contractors have nothing to do with this. This is just the space in a building used to store construction materials, whether you're a contractor or not. So I didn't really know what the intent was. This only shows up in the schedule of uses based on my search. It sort of makes the definition, it basically says, I think, anyone can store construction materials on their property in a building or.
As long as it's inside.
Yeah.
In which case, why is it a contractor's storage? Why is it not just storage?
Right.
Good question. Question for the ages.
I also, it lists all the equipment or parts thereof by a construction or other contractor residing. I don't know what a construction is.
I think they left out
I think
a
it's
word.
construction contractor or other contractor.
Uh-huh.
That's how I read it.
Oh, okay.
By a construction, you could put
I
the word
see. Yeah,
contractor
yeah.
twice. But that whole last phrase becomes meaningless based on the second sentence.
Yes, such accessory use will, or shall also apply to other than contract.
Other contractors.
Oh,
other
that
than
contract, no,
contractors.
they want to apply, everybody, my
Well, it
read
applies to
that
everyone.
it wants to apply to everyone.
Then why is it?
Then why are we defining it at all? It'd be,
I mean, I want to be able to store my rakes and hose in my garage, and so you do too. Is that a construction storage? I don't think so.
so do we just delete that last?
I mean, to me, I would probably delete that last sentence, but honestly, I was confused by the whole thing.
Of course, not.
What, such accessory use shall also apply to contractors?
Apply to other than contractors,
Other
which,
than,
I'm saying you want to delete that last sentence?
That's what we're talking about, yes.
Yes.
I thought maybe you would want to just delete by a construction or other contractor residing.
Could be a tag team. I just have a question.
No, because you want, it says residing on the premises, which I think is kind of important.
yeah, I think so too.
So what are you doing, what are we doing with, sorry, contractor storage?
Well, let's see what are you talking about contractor storage, Russ?
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, I'm looking at the whole paragraph there. How the hell can you do that? How can you turn around and tell somebody they can't store something inside their building, whether it's equipment, materials, machinery, vehicles?
So,
I mean, a person has a building, he has a large thing enclosed, and I can't see how you can say, it's like unlawful search to go in there and say you can't have this stuff in there. You can have anything you want in your building,
Interesting.
you know, if it's not visible to the outside.
Well, I don't think this is telling you can't, but you got to look at where the definition goes to.
Are we still on storage?
yeah.
Contractor storage?
Space inside an enclosed building used for the storage or keeping construction, other supplies, materials, equipment, machinery, or vehicles, are parts thereof. I don't know, I don't have a problem with it, I just think it's kind of like, how the hell can you tell what's inside somebody's building?
When we were doing the revision, we were saying the same thing. As long as it's in a building or behind a fenced area, it
It's
should be fine.
concealed in there, you shouldn't be an issue.
So would you remove it?
No, that's just the definition. That's not really saying,
What the zone?
well, you got to look at the zoning
Requirements would
where,
If you look at the schedule of uses,
Yeah,
it's found in the schedule of uses.
this has been coming up a lot lately, by the way.
Yeah,
It says there's no site plan required and it's permitted everywhere
yeah,
except in a floodplain. Do we even have any floodplains in town?
sure.
yeah.
So it's
We have a lot.
prohibited in a floodplain, but everywhere else it's permitted, so.
But by the same token, contractor's yard, which comes up next, is not permitted anywhere.
Yeah, that's the one that is important.
That's the one that's the real, yeah, that's only permitted in an industrial district.
And I think the reason we
Right.
keep contractor's storage is the
To
differentiation
differentiate,
from contractor's
Right.
yard.
they're basically the same, except that a yard is outdoors and a storage is indoors.
Well, I mean, I hate to say it, but I tend to agree with Russ that if you want to keep stuff in a building on your property.
Again, this is not regulating it. We have to look at the regulation.
Right.
Right, but.
This is just defining it.
I understand, but you told me earlier, if it's not specifically permitted in the schedule of permitted uses, it's prohibited. That's what one of you told me.
Well, that's always been
Right,
So if that's the case.
determination.
right.
Then we need something to allow me to have a backhoe in my garage if I want to put it there, right?
Well, that's what contractor storage, because it says.
Right, but it's just, it's written in a nonsense way. I mean, in my view, it's just to say it has to do with the contractor, except it has to do with anybody. If we mean it to be everybody, let's just say it's a building that houses construction.
Yeah, we could, like, equipment, machinery, or vehicles or parts thereof, period. Like,
At least that would be clear.
yeah.
Ray Oberly back. I question the fact, is a farm considered a business? If it is, farmers put their tractors and their big windrow rakes and a lot of their equipment inside a building if possible, but some of them don't fit, so they got to put them outside.
Again, storage, I don't think we have a problem with, because we're not, by this definition, we're not regulating it. We're just defining it. It's the contractor yard that would say you can't have it. And I don't think a farm would be considered a contractor's yard.
Some farms do contract work for other farms.
I
And I know several
I
of
happen
them,
to
because I had
know,
hired them over the years myself to get stuff done that I just don't have the specialized piece of equipment to do that
But if-
particular job.
I used to hire a farmer who happened to be a mason, and they would use their farm actually to even soil mine. So, you know, there is limited amount of soil mining that's allowed in farming too, by the DEC regulations.
Yeah, I know those.
So does that now become a contractor's yard? I mean, you know, I think we're splitting hairs, but I think the intent is that, you know, if your main business is being a contractor and you have a yard full of equipment, that's what's being regulated.
So let's just do the storage first.
So what are you suggesting?
I'm suggesting that after the word
Thereof.
parts thereof, we just
Yeah.
have a period, and it doesn't say by a construction contractor or other contractor residing on the premises. It doesn't matter. Anyone can store that equipment inside of a building.
Well, that's fine, except that the term contractor storage implies that it's for contractors, so how do you,
Yeah.
we'd have to change the,
Right,
it
why
shouldn't
is
be,
it-
if it's gonna be storage for everybody, it shouldn't say contractor storage. It should say something other than, right? Because
We
that
have-
Well,
limits it.
except that it's talking about contracting construction equipment.
We have storage, by the way.
I was just turning to that
I'm
page.
wondering.
We do, okay.
So this would require the CEO to do an inspection inside these buildings, which requires them to go and get a court order to allow him to inspect it if I said, no, you can't go in my building.
Again, this is just definitions, it's not,
Just the definition. This is not the regulation.
I'm just saying, but
Right, it does, there's
you
no,
would interpret this to give him the authority to do that. No?
This is not a regulation. It's just a permitted use. We're saying you're permitted to have any equipment you want in a building.
Yeah, like, that's what it
That's all it's
says.
saying. There's no regulation.
And the last sentence, shall apply to other than contractors.
Yeah, we're-
See, everybody can do it. Everybody.
Yeah,
can do
that's
it.
why we want to just delete all of that and just say what the storage is. Doesn't matter who.
Yeah,
What?
but then the word contractor kind of, shouldn't be in the definition.
Well,
If you
right.
take out construction.
Well, the reason I think
contractor-
contractor is in the definition is because it's talking specifically of keeping construction or other supplies. Whereas regular storage doesn't talk about that.
Well, so maybe
I
what,
think the simpler way is just to leave it as it is, because it says shall apply to other than contractors, so, and you do have it in the table already. I mean, how many things are we gonna change?
Yeah, I mean, that's fine with me too.
all right, so what are we doing? Are we leaving it the way it was, or are we taking out?
I mean, I
I
don't think
can't
this
take
is
it.
something that we're,
come back.
we can just leave it, sure. We have it, what we can do is we
For
can,
what it's worth, it's totally confusing the way it's written. People will not know what that means. They'll be scratching their head. If we just do it the way Mike suggested, it'll be crystal clear, and nothing will have changed what our apparent intent is. So let's make the, I mean,
Yeah.
let's make the change, keep it simple, and we all know what it means.
Then you're gonna have to remove it from the schedule of use, right?
No.
no, because it's defined and it's permitted everywhere.
But would you need the definition if it's expressed?
So are we taking out such also?
The definition's staying, we're just deleting a sentence and a half from the end to make it clear as to what it means, and then it will still be in the schedule of use. So it's a minor change. All right.
we may have to revisit the definition of storage when we get there.
Yeah. Oh, we will.
No doubt.
Surely you knew we would.
All right, whatever.
I just want to get to the D's tonight.
I don't think that's gonna
Get to
happen.
the
though.
Ds.
We got 45 minutes. Come on, people.
Kind of being quiet here, trying to help that along.
right,
The next one is the big,
Contractor's yard?
So it stops after therefore?
yes. Any space outside used for storage or something.
Outside of the building.
So you're taking out the business about residing on the premises.
Yes. A contractor residing on the premises. Because if it, in the next sentence, if it says that it doesn't have to be a contractor, then why does it matter if a contractor resides on the premises or not?
All right.
So the point of the next one is that, never mind, I know what the point
The
is.
contractors' yards are not a permitted use except in one district in the town, the industrial district, which is about this big.
It's one lot.
Yeah, it
It's one lot on 9G.
Yeah, basically, on Hibernia Road. That's the
No, on
ag district.
Right on 9G.
What about there's a little industrial, there's one on Hibernia Road, too.
Yeah,
Very small, couple
Oh.
buildings. On Hibernia Road,
Well,
there's-
it's the 20-acre lot,
Yeah,
but
it's a
is that industrial?
yeah, it's industrial.
Yeah,
I believe
he's right.
I believe it's, but it's only a couple lots.
Okay,
Very small.
right.
Anyway,
So we got 2 lots in the whole town.
or 4 maybe, but other than that, you can't do it. It's not a permitted use anywhere.
Right.
So
so then the definition's good.
then it's
I
not,
love
I
that
mean,
definition.
yeah, so I guess what I'm asking is, do we really need to fuss about a definition for something that's not even allowed anyway? In 90% of the town.
I don't think anybody's arguing to change it.
No.
Okay, all right.
No, we've had a lot of
Okay.
issues lately with,
Yes, we have.
we've had issues between what something is considered a storage and what's considered a yard with the zoning administrator, but I
Right.
think the definitions are fine.
I like the definition, and I have only a very minor change.
Okay.
My specialty is minor changes. If you see in the third line, after listing equipment, machinery, vehicles, or parts thereof, excuse me, or parts thereof, but then in the last line, if such supplies, materials, equipment, machinery, or vehicles is not approved or permitted on the same lot, you need to put it or parts
Or
thereof.
parts thereof after vehicles?
Yeah. Make sure there's a comma after vehicles.
Well, you lived up to your reputation, Ian.
Yeah.
So parts thereof is not approved or permitted.
Yes. or
Right.
Parts thereof is not approved or permitted on the same lot.
So it matches, that's basically.
Does this then apply to farmers too?
No, it says contractor.
No, it only applies to the industrial sections of the town.
Yeah, buildings used for storage or sale
I
of
understand, but a farmer could be a contractor that does lawn brush hogging, does fertilizer, makes hay at other places.
But
Yeah, I think
this,
that's under agricultural. I think
I'm
there's a
just
different.
questioning it
I don't,
here.
I don't think it applies to farmers. I wouldn't read it that way.
I'm just trying to be safe.
Well, what if you had, let's use it this way, say you had a farm and XYZ amount of acres were rated for the ag exemption, that's what they're using, and then they have another part of the farm, or another part of that parcel, I should say, and they run their excavation business, is the whole thing a farm? I'm opening up another can of worms, but I mean,
That's
it's
the good question.
It's a good question, because there's people there, and I know several excavators, not just in town, all throughout the county.
Yeah.
That have run a farm, they have the ag exemption, but they're running their business of excavation off of that. It's getting too, it's using the property for two, but you're only rating so many acres for the farm.
Well,
Doesn't the-
for
doesn't-
ag exemption,
For
it's
ag exemption.
delineated by
And then
soil.
how's that, because technically they have ag exemption
Well,
on
I
that
would think
parcel.
that the whole farm is ag exempt.
Doesn't
I'm
that-
sure that they don't separate it, because if they did
No, no, that's
separate,
my point, they don't separate, but they're running a bit,
No, the whole farm is not.
and I'm not against
They-
that.
They take out buildings and stuff. They
I
take
understand, they
out-
take out your personal building.
No, but they also take out wetlands and stuff like that,
Yeah, but
unless
doesn't
you
the ag
have
exemption
ag exemption
cover that?
for that purpose, generally for,
But basically, if someone came
hayfields
here and
and
said, hey,
pasture.
I have ag
just as much
exemption,
as
I'm a farm, so, and, at the thing, okay, well, no, you're running a business, well, I already got ag exemption, so everything's acceptable.
Okay, let's not beat these things to death.
Like I said, to me, it does,
Controlled area?
either one way
moving
or
on,
the other.
controlled area.
There he is, he's back.
And controlled area I didn't understand why a wetland of more than 12.4 acres.
Because then it becomes regulated by the DEC.
Sorry, I didn't hear you.
The DEC regulates wetlands by 12.4 acres or more.
So,
So it's, at that point, it's out of our purview, you're saying?
Yeah, then it's a DEC issue. And we wrote a wetlands law down to a half acre, so the town has its own wetlands rule,
I see. All right, that's helpful,
but
thank
the
you.
DEC is 12.4.
And then just a question in B, it refers to a 2008 map. Is that still the updated, has it been updated in the last 14 years? Does anyone know?
The map for what?
The water,
Proposed water protection
the water
amendment.
protection amount,
Well, we wrote, where does it say? What,
and B, controlled area B.
second line from
April
the bottom.
2008?
Revised August 2008.
Was it 2008? Yeah, it was probably 2008 when we wrote that law. So that was the last law.
All right, just asking.
Because I was relatively new when it was proposed.
It does refer, it does say you can, the revised or updated or
Yeah.
adjusted map,
It's covered in case it gets changed.
yeah. Convenience store, moving on.
Convenience store?
My question, convenience store, second line, it's household items and goods commonly associated with the same. I would just make it and/or. You don't have to have all of these things, you just have to have some of them.
Right.
And if I understand it correctly, the 3,000 square feet, if it's more than 3,000 square feet, it's prohibited. You can't do that in town. Am I understanding that correctly?
Well, you can do it anyway. Convenience stores are not allowed anywhere in the town.
Oh, is that? Oh,
Yeah.
Except for on Salt Pointer.
Well, technically, it's not a convenience store, but
Okay.
that's a whole nother issue.
Convenience
that's-
stores,
It's
with a special
complicated.
permit, it's allowed in.
No. If you look at the schedule of uses, it's dashes everywhere for convenience store.
Yeah, I mean, every time
Convenience
Stewart's
store-
comes up, it's an issue as to what it is.
Exactly.
It says convenience store, comma, no drive-in is what I'm looking at.
Where are you looking?
It's scheduled uses.
Convenience store also says, which does not sell gasoline, and Stewart's sells gasoline.
Yeah, but we're just talking about in the schedule of uses, is it permitted? And
I'm looking on page 4 of my schedule of uses.
Yep.
Right.
Okay, what I'm looking at here for convenience store shows dashes everywhere. So you must be looking at something different.
Obviously.
Are you looking at, are you looking
These
at?
were the proposed change.
Oh, okay, all right.
I got it off the web,
Okay,
our town
that's, so
website.
that's
Yeah,
different
this
than
is
what's
the
here.
proposed change
Okay.
versus what's in the book
Right, got
currently.
it. Right now, it's not allowed anywhere, but
Okay.
anyway, okay. But yes, to answer your 3,300 is the maximum.
You're right, and above that, you just can't do it. Yeah,
Right,
okay.
right.
These proposed changes in schedule of use, are they, where we can download them?
Yeah,
Yeah, they're on the
That's where I got it.
town website.
you don't have that right there?
Well, this one says special permit, you said new one doesn't have it.
No,
That
this,
is the new one.
That
you
is
have the
in
new one.
Permit is the new one.
The old one,
Elliott has the existing law which says it's prohibited everywhere.
Okay.
so if you have a printout that's more current.
The book is the current, that's the, or the book is the old, that's the current. All right, and/or
Okay.
conversion residential?
Are we going to make that residential conversion? We can, if it's referred to?
I would think so, but.
I would think so too. Yes?
The next one, coverage.
Yes.
That doesn't work as written. The word coverage is used many places for many different things, including like insurance and communication facilities. It's not, every time it's used, it doesn't mean building coverage, it means other things.
So we should just delete it.
We should take it out.
We need to get rid of it, and if it's used anywhere where we need to change it to building coverage, we can do that,
Right.
but we can't say it the way it's here.
Well, do we have building coverage?
Yes,
So then we can delete it.
we have building coverage
We do?
in the definitions.
Oh, yeah, because it's a C building coverage, so.
Yes, we have that.
Okay.
Crematorium?
It's fairly obvious.
Yeah, I just put After the word crematorium, I put of people and animals, just to define what it's related to.
At the end.
At the end of the,
Very
yeah.
end, the definition.
Yeah.
What else
It's
would you?
not used for, say, your abattoir, and you get all the junk stuff that you don't know what to do with, you take it to it. That's not what it's for. You could make it for that, but I'm just using that as an example.
Do people burn animals in town?
Oh, what?
No, not really.
You're saying, do people burn animals, or there's businesses that, there's crematoriums for
The reason I'm
animals?
asking is by making, and I'm not necessarily disagreeing, by making the change, I'm guessing we are now permitting burning of animals in town, where before we prohibited it.
Well, this is a
Well, it's-
crematorium, which has its own definition of.
If it, but if
Well, I
it's
understand,
not,
But I think, to me, I thought of it as for humans, and
right, what's the definition of a crematorium? I think it may not apply to inanimate objects.
animals aren't inanimate.
I'm saying that I'm not sure I agree with Ray that we need to further define it, because I think crematorium
Already includes animals.
and people and not things, like, we're not talking about,
Well, I would agree with not things,
So when comparing those, so, are you crematorium?
Yes.
crematoriums are only permitted.
I'm glad you weren't at the mic, Russ.
It's only permitted in the industrial.
Might have some backlash on that one.
Hold on, what's that?
Crematorium's a
I'm
what,
sorry, I'm
Ian?
The
trying to.
crematorium is only permitted in the industrial, the tiny little industrial
Oh.
area we have in town.
right.
So it's, to me, not much of an issue, and it requires a
Oh,
site.
so
plan.
we can open one. up
So-
now.
Do we want to add in of
you want
people
to.
or animals?
I don't.
Doesn't matter to me.
Catherine doesn't, Michael doesn't care.
Well, if you're burning other stuff, it's not a crematorium, right?
That's the point I was trying to make. I don't think it would be.
Chris, what's your pleasure?
I mean, I usually think of it as burning, either a human or an animal. So, I guess if where's it, it just, does it go into detail on the section this is? I should.
It's only in
I
the
have it.
schedule of use. And it says in the industrial zone.
Right, with a special permit.
And, right, you're saying to just define it as a human or animal. I don't have a problem with that. I mean, whatever you guys want, I understand where
We'll
Ray's
leave it.
coming, makes,
Cul-de-sac.
That's fine.
I tried, Ray, to help you.
I think we left it in.
Cut.
Hey, that's the C's.
Yes.
Cut is, we have the same problem as coverage. It's used for a variety of contexts and doesn't always mean what it says here. I think what would solve it is to start the definition by saying, when used in the context of cutting land, comma, a portion of land, et cetera.
Repeat that one more time.
When used in the context of cutting land, comma.
Before we get to D, I have a note that we wanted to add a definition for critical environmental areas. I don't know when I wrote that note.
Several years ago, probably.
Probably.
Where does it occur in
To
the,
do that.
We have critical environmental areas.
Michael's going to volunteer to do that,
I don't know, but we'll see.
since you brought it up.
I just know, I'm surprised it's not in any of your notes.
Somehow we managed to not pay attention to that one.
I also wanted to ask, where did we land on Clubhouse, dare I ask? I feel that that wasn't resolved.
We were putting that off.
That's fine, I'm fine with tabling it, but I'm just, so long as it's,
So, in this definition of clubhouse, I added in, I thought, which was Ian's suggestion of I2, IV. Right? That was your last version? So under club, we listed off those, and under clubhouse was the short version of the, so if that was acceptable, what Ian wrote, I had already included it.
I apologize.
Let's not go backwards, Catherine. So Michael's going to write critical environment.
Apparently I am.
Nice.
If that enables us to move forward to D's, yes.
Well, I got stuck with the horses, so you
Yeah.
can see, fair is fair.
Oof, daycare.
D, we can close? We got time.
Yeah, we got there.
Daycare.
I remember we had a lengthy discussion with Neil about.
And then everything got deleted.
This was
Well,
really
there was a reason for
simplified,
that, but
right?
I'm not, Dean, do you remember?
No.
There was some reason why, having to do with the state definitions or something, that's why Neil took all this stuff out?
Well, to be licensed, I think you had to have 5 or more people in order to require you to have a license. I think there was a definition as to why the state got involved.
Well, I think it's the fact that it's all regulated by the state,
Right.
then we don't have
Right.
to,
I think that was, basically his premise is that since the state has very deeply involved in regulating and authorizing these things, that we didn't need to bother with the definitions. I think that's why he took them out.
My only comment there is,
You're gonna add
say
in,
children only,
you're gonna add in adults. I knew you were gonna do that.
add adults. Because we've had them here in town.
Yeah, I know.
We
we-
still do.
Okay.
Adult daycare.
All right,
Yeah.
children and adults.
oh, that's a good point. I like it's a very
Got a
simple
place to go to.
definition.
See you at daycare.
We're already, hey, Ian, we're already starting it with the rec committee. We're getting, well, bad comment. I'm just joking, everyone.
I wonder why he included
Gross
that.
floor area? Or floor area?
What? How did you missed a whole,
Oh,
A page?
where's floor area come
just
from?
of things that we wrote, so let's, let me go back to,
DBM next.
I'm just trying to move it along.
I'm with you, but we have DBM next.
Measure of the power level of air, electromagnetic. I think that's a perfect definition.
For what, DBM?
DBM.
Who the hell knows what a DBM is? Fine. Works for me.
So it's not just a BM.
Well, that too.
Man, the jokes are bad
I know,
tonight.
I know.
Aye.
Tired and punchy, right?
There you go. We're just punchy.
All right, so DBM is okay, yeah, but demolition.
I think demolition's fairly self-explanatory. Pretty good.
Density?
What,
Oop.
why would demolition just be
Yep.
load supporting?
That's what I'm wondering.
Why not just, the original definition that Neil deleted says, any dismantling, intentional destruction, or removal of buildings or structures, blah, blah, blah. I mean, that seems perfectly fine. I don't understand what was to be gained by changing it.
Removal of a load-supporting structural member?
I think the removal of a load structure member is more restrictive because you could just
Oh,
take out the center support of a building,
And
but
leave
leave
it-
the building
oh.
intact.
Or you could take
this-
down a wall.
Versus the older definition, you're actually taking down the whole building.
yeah, but does that actually count as demolition? I wonder. I've never heard of I've never had a case that I remember
I
on the
mean, if you
planning
took,
board.
I suppose, the load-supporting structural members down, then the building would not
Collapse.
stand anymore.
But usually when people come in for demolition permits, they take down the entire building.
Right.
The situation that could apply to this taking a supporting structural member, a lot of people got to replace a porch, and they have to take the posts that hold the porch
That's
up
true.
and rebuild it. Do they need a demolition permit to do that?
Does that,
Technically, years ago, when I had the wraparound porch, I had to get a demolition permit to take the old one down to do that, and it wasn't a structural, I mean, I guess,
But it was,
I
It was
made
structural to the porch.
Structural to the porch, yes, yeah.
but You know, I'm just saying, that's very typical of people doing that. Or they have a deck that goes out the back, you know, and it's 3 feet above ground level or something.
You required to get a demolition permit for that?
You need a demolition permit for that? That sounds weird.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're
taking it
replacing
down.
that structural member,
Yeah.
I don't
If you're
know that.
replacing it, you'd have to have the building permit.
Well, no, like when he's saying
Building
with a
permit
porch. if
versus
you-
a
if you-
demolition permit.
But you don't need a demolition permit, which is a separate process.
Why don't we, isn't that maybe the right idea, the wrecking or
Yeah.
removal without replacement of any load
Or the
supporting?
wrecking or permanent removal,
We could do that too.
something like that.
Well, but a demolition permit, you can take down a building and build another one on the same site. So it's not a permanent, it doesn't have to be a permanent removal.
Well, of that building it is.
Yes, okay.
Without like replacement? So you're not replacing it the way it was?
I think just the first words, wrecking or removal of the building or structure. Forget about whether it's 1 post or 5 posts or whatever it is.
So how about the wrecking or removal of a building or structure or any part thereof?
No, can't be
No.
any part thereof.
That's too broad, right?
That's
Well,
gonna get you into the trouble.
So
with just
recently, we issued a demolition permit. They were going to partially demolish a building, and then they were brought into the ZBA to explain themselves after they removed the entire building. Is that correct, or was it the planning board that they came into?
Planning board, probably.
It was the planning board. They removed the entire building, which they did not have a permit for. They,
That's different. That's not what I'm talking to.
Well, but that, yeah, because that's a violation of the permit.
but that's what I'm saying, though, or part thereof. That's why, because a demolition permit was issued to demolish only part of the building.
So, yeah, okay, but they
Not the whole thing.
Right, they violated the terms of the of the
By
permit.
doing the whole thing.
By doing the whole thing,
Yeah.
regardless of what the definition says.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
But their permit was to demolish, they got a demolition permit to remove part of the building.
Yeah, because a demolition permit requires a big ritual too, you know. You
Yeah.
gotta consult with people, pay legal notice and all that stuff.
But you also need to identify exactly what you're gonna do.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, take the typical example, you're replacing the uprights holding a porch, 4 or 3 4x4s or 6x6s. You gotta go through that whole ritual just to, it costs more to go through a ritual than it is to replace them.
That's why I think it's permanent removal and of a building or structure or part thereof.
So you get rid of what's here, in other words?
Well, you know, the wrecking or permanent removal of any,
Oh, I see,
of
okay.
a building or structure or any part thereof.
Well, it's permanent if you take the building down and rebuild it, it's still
Well,
permanent.
this is what I'm saying, like, if they're just replacing the posts on a porch, that's not the permanent removal necessary, that's the replacement of something, so that's not a demolition.
Maintenance.
Yeah. So,
Okay, I'm just
Okay.
bringing it up so we're covered.
yeah,
I just want to look at 22B
yeah. Does that sound all
to
right to
see
you,
if we
Ryan?
make any changes.
Yeah, there was something there about accessory structures or something. I don't remember that.
Addition to one accessory structure without permit. One accessory structure with a maximum floor area of 120 square feet, which we changed to 144, without
shed.
Well, that has
the
to do with sheds.
issuance. Well, it's one accessory structure with the issue, I'm just looking at what 22B is.
Right.
Permit does not have permanent foundation, structure is not served by any utilities, structure does not exceed 10 feet in
Well,
height.
I guess the idea is that the sheds, you can take sheds down without having to get a,
A
But that was
demolition permit.
Deleted.
right, that's why he deleted that, yeah.
Hmm.
Dean was just looking to see what was there.
Such structure shall not be included in the total permit subsequence. So 22B really doesn't have anything to do with anything other than the fact that it's an accessory structure that we're not counting.
Right.
Oops. So, what do we want to do with demolition? Because the wrecking or removal of any load-supporting structure member of a building or structure.
So what I had come up with was the wrecking or permanent removal of any building or structure or part thereof. We removed the load-bearing part.
So long as they don't have a building permit?
So long as what?
They don't have a building permit? Because if they have a building permit,
Oh,
part of the building permit process doesn't
That-
necessarily mean that they have to have a,
yeah,
because
but,
like if you're rebuilding the deck and you're changing the posts, you're taking off.
Well, you can technically just change one post at a time on something, you're doing a repair, which,
Right.
that's a
Yeah.
repair, you don't need a building permit. The question is if you take the whole thing down to
Yeah.
reform it, it is the trigger for the building permit.
but does,
The only thing I would say,
would that include it?
you were gonna say, removal of a building or structure. I'm envisioning somebody that starts doing something and you wanna stop them and they say, well, I didn't take down the whole thing, I only did this. So I think the demolition, you might have a better tooth to use, I might say, to prevent somebody from doing something, and if you don't put in just that they gotta do the whole building or structure, if you follow what I'm saying. Supposing they just start tearing down part of it, there's still demolition.
Well, that's why we added or part thereof on the end of it, is what we're gonna add.
Oh, okay, didn't catch that.
Yeah, we'll add or part thereof, and then,
Okay.
What if we say dismantling instead of wrecking? Wrecking sounds really bad. Dismantling doesn't sound quite so bad.
I'm fine with that. It doesn't matter. Me.
Just a thought.
So do we want to add in, this unless already part of a building
But
permit?
when you apply for a building permit, I mean, is the demolition part of that? Or do you have to get a separate permit?
I
for
don't
dem-
know. I mean, if you're just taking down something versus if you're taking down something to
Right,
rebuild it.
yeah, well,
So the current case we're talking about, I
Yeah.
believe they made them come in to get the demolition
Right.
permit to finish taking down the rest of the building.
This was a couple months ago.
That's
This was
because they took
actually
down the
day
whole
we were
building.
in-
Yeah.
I'm
I know the
looking
case.
more in part that.
Yeah, but then they got
They're
a
just
separate
taking
permit
one
to
member
replace
or
it.
one,
Oh.
one section.
but,
Yeah.
I mean, what Dean is asking is that if demolition is part of the building project, is it all covered by,
The
Right.
building permit.
yeah?
Right.
So you don't need to get a separate demolition permit,
yeah,
I
yeah.
think, yeah. Because usually when people, they're for separate things, but it doesn't
So
have
that's
to
what I'm
be
saying,
that way.
unless covered by a building
Yeah.
permit.
Oh, yeah, that's,
I mean, I suppose, yeah, I mean, it's easy enough to find out whether a building permit can include a demolition as well, I don't know.
That might be, yeah, if you're getting the building permit, that
Right.
might be the easiest solution.
So, but, I mean, we could just ask,
Well, if it's covered by the building permit, it's covered. If it's not covered by the
well,
building
that's
permit,
true.
then you need
Yeah,
the
that's
demolition
true,
permit.
Right,
yeah.
right, that's true.
Density?
I'm good.
You're sitting close over there. I was lost where you were.
Detached. He's waiting for detached.
Okay, detached.
Well, brother, here he comes.
So, I know we had a long discussion about semi-detached, and I actually don't know how it's sorted out, but the way detached is worded here,
We left it
I don't
out.
think it quite works because it refers only to buildings, but several of the regulations refer to detached structures. So it seems to me, to make it work, it should, with reference to a building or structure, and you do that 3 times. But again, I forgot, I don't know what we
I
did with
think with
semi-detached.
semi-detached, we decided we weren't gonna,
I thought we just deleted
I
semi.
crossed out and
Just took it out.
semi-detached at the end of this definition, which
we just-
indicates to me that
we just took it out,
Okay,
yeah. So it's either attached or detached, basically, is what you got, yeah.
So, but I think you just, 3 times, you just say to a building or structure, first, second,
Oh, yeah. That's all right.
Well, that was,
Developable acreage.
couldn't find it anywhere.
couldn't find what?
Yeah, I'll check.
Couldn't find it used.
Semi-detached?
Developable.
Developable.
acreage.
Oh,
Next one.
sorry.
Developable acreage.
Yeah, that's a mouthful.
Could not find when searching.
Well, that's
Yeah, it does.
the issue we talked
It's a
about
good definition,
before.
but just doesn't get used.
Well, except that, remember what Dean's criteria for building envelope is that it's not mentioned, but it's used, a term that's used frequently, so we,
But it's not used in the zoning rules.
right, no, either is building envelope. But we decided to keep the definition because, Dean's premise is that
I don't believe in that
it's a
approach
term that people use.
through drafting, but,
I feel like we should be consistent whichever way we go, if it's not in there.
Well, then we have to take out building envelope if that's the case.
I don't find it.
What?
Developable.
Well, yeah, Arnie said it's not there. See if building envelope, I think you looked it up last time.
Yeah,
And
it's not in there.
It didn't show up.
No.
Yeah. Well,
I don't find the word developable. Never mind acreage.
it seems to me it's a term that's pretty commonly used in, I don't see any harm in including it, but if the board wants to take it out, then take it out.
So, I remember this subdivision that came in over on Browning Road, and there was an issue as to the developable acreage in regards to most of the land was wetlands. And so even though it was, let's say, let's make it easy, 5 acres in a 1 acre zone, where you normally would be able to get 5 lots out of it, it wasn't developable for the 5 lots because of the wetlands. That was the constrained area, so that each lot had to have sufficient developable area in which to put a septic, a well, and a house, not within that flood zone. And I think that would be the purpose of leaving developable acreage in there, for the reason that, and most developers know this, but for the cases where, like the one that was on Hollow Road, you get someone who's brand new, never done a subdivision before, and finds themselves in trouble because of not having the experience.
The term that is used,
Yeah.
which
Yep.
and is defined as buildable area, which to me, I think they have different definitions, but the same concept. And that's why I would suggest deleting developable acreage, because we
That's
don't
fine.
use it, and leaving buildable area, which we do use.
Okay. How about development?
That's used a lot.
District?
In the first line, it says to improved or unimproved real estate including. Real estate is not defined. I think you want word parcel or lot, whichever one you resolve using. I don't care, but it's not real estate.
But then why would it say including but not limited to buildings or other structures? Because a lot is not a building or other structure.
That's the change. Those are
Any humanly incurred change, improved or unimproved.
Those examples of changes that are picked up.
So you, okay.
That was all on that.
What was that?
one.
We're gonna change real estate to lot.
Unimproved lot?
Yeah.
Disturbance?
I would suggest two changes. One is very minor. The word disturbed, when not being used with respect to me, it seems to me should have a similar definition. So I would add at the end, quote, disturbed, end quote, shall have a comparable meaning.
Disturbed,
Disturbed is used in 4 places that I found.
That's what I
And
was gonna
believe
ask.
It should be the same meaning.
What if you just say disturbance, comma, disturbed in the front?
Are we doing,
We've done that a couple times where we
well,
have-
or you could put in disturbed as a separate definition and see disturbance. Maybe that's the simple, I don't care. We should do something. That's what, my only point is, something to fix it.
All right, so I'll add in disturbed, and I'll put in the bottom of disturbance, in quotation, shall mean a comparable meaning.
Okay, great. And my other comment in the first line, it says all land preparation activities involving, et cetera. I think it should be all land, some things you could argue are not preparation. So I would have said all land preparation or modification activities involving blah, blah, blah.
Well, I don't really care if you put in modification, but I think it's the activities involving the movement, placement. I think it further defines what it actually is.
Well,
but-
that's my point, is that it should be anything you do which does movement, replacement, removal, anything that does that should trigger the regulation. So you could just say all activities, you could delete land preparation, just say all activities involving the movement, or shifting of storage.
That's fine. Let's just
That's another
delete.
way to do it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a simple one.
So we're going to take it out?
It's gonna say all activities, including the movement, placement, dot, dot, dot.
I have a note about the definition for dorm,
For what?
but,
Oh,
Dormitory? You mean?
yeah, because it's,
I had to add dormitory as well, but I've already been tasked with one.
Yeah, that issue came up having to do with, Ray brought that up. I forgot what it was in reference
right,
to.
but it was a previous definition, right?
Yeah, well, I thought we included it all part of that camp.
Camp, is that what it was?
I thought we added dormitories within camp and campgrounds to kind of fix that problem.
Yes, we did. But then did we say we needed a definition?
Right, we added and dorm, so do we have to define dorm? is the
That's why I
question.
thought we didn't have to. I thought it was your suggestion, by the way.
It does say dormitories and, yeah, under campground. There you go.
I mean,
Well, I mean, if it's,
your pleasure if you want one. If you want one, you gotta
if
write
it's
it.
not necessary, I don't want, listen, we don't need to add, but I just didn't know if it was necessary because it's mentioned. It's not, depending, I suppose it depends on if you capitalize it or not at this moment, right?
Well, I didn't.
Right, so then, then
Then we're good.
we're good.
Can I just back up for a minute under disturbance?
Yeah, we're done with that one.
Well, let's finish this first.
Oh, sorry.
That's a, so are we done with not needing?
I don't think we need it.
Okay, great.
Need what?
Definition of
I
dormitory.
thought we finished that. Oh, okay, sorry.
Okay, back to it.
Now, what do you got?
Well, I don't see how we can take out the first four words and have it mean anything.
It's only last two. It's land
So it's-
preparation.
All activities involving the
Well,
movement,
yeah,
placement, removal, transfer, or shifting
Well,
of soil and
I
or
think the
vegetation.
fact that this is for modifying or preparing land is crucial to the definition. That's why, okay, the two words. I think we need to keep those two words. Or modification as opposed to preparation, but it seems to me if you take out those two words,
But,
it's not saying much.
well, I think if you read the entire definition, you're good. A condition of land disturbance shall be deemed to continue until the area of disturbance is returned to its original state.
Do we make it all land activities involving the movement, placement?
But then we have
But
to
it says
find
shifting
land.
of soil and vegetation, like, I feel like
One
it's,
word.
it's already clear what you're
Except,
talking.
the first sentence really is the most important sentence in the definition.
Okay.
And if you take out land preparation and just say all activities, that's,
It's all activities involving the movement, placement, or removal, transfer, or shifting of soil and/or vegetation, which they in themselves are land, right?
All land preparation. You're preparing the land for a project.
yeah, I
Right,
just think you need to, if you're going to say
Leave
that,
that.
you need to get it up front, but never
But
mind.
the concern,
I
whether
mean,
it's
I
valid.
personally think the definition here is fine the way it is, but I don't think we have to add all land preparation activities involving the movement, placement, removal. I think
It was, Ian brought it up because he's concerned that it doesn't identify modifications.
well, modification, so is the modification anything after the, for a preparation? I mean,
Well, then-
what is the modification for? Is it preparation for
I mean, if
something
we
else,
left-
or is it a that's,
What if you just want to change the land because you want to change the land? You like it better with a hill here rather than a hill there, better view from my
Or
window.
just,
That's not
or
preparing
so
anything.
say modification.
yeah, but this is disturbance is about preparation for
Right,
a
which is-
project.
Which is narrow. It's a narrower, you have to be preparing it for something. My point is, whenever you're disturbing the land,
I think it's reaching, but I think it's reaching. I think this is pretty clean right here. It gets right into the point, you know? Someone wants to come out and they want to regrade their property a little bit on one side of it. You're going to tell them that they can't do that?
Well, first of all, this doesn't regulate
No, we're
anything.
just
This is
defining-
this is
No, no,
definitions.
I know that, but they're going to go back, you know, it's going to go back and use that definition into wherever it's placed on that. So, I mean, in essence, that's the whole thing. When you just say, oh, well, that says, okay, well, your modification, you go out there and talk about modification, you're going to plant some plants and you're cultivating a section of the property to kind of do your beds, or you're bringing more dirt in around your house to put something in. That's a modification.
I would argue that could be preparation also.
Well, it could be preparation.
And so what you're suggesting is we should just delete the whole concept.
No,
Should
no, I
change.
just says, I think the disturbance, the way it is in blue right here, in my eyes, I think it's,
Yeah, but they want the idea is to take out that and just say all activities.
yeah, it's preparation for a project or something going on. So if you're taking out all activities,
No,
you're
no, they're going to leave all activities, take out land
yeah,
preparation.
no, that's what I mean, all land, that's what they're talking about, a project. Then saying every little thing becomes, you can't, whatever this definition goes to in whatever section, you're gonna have to, and my guess is have to get, permits and reviews for every little thing you do on your property. I think it's gonna be way too restrictive. Changing it,
So what's the consensus? Just say
Well, now
all
I-
activities? Is that what you guys want to do?
I'd leave it to, that's
Well,
my consensus.
I think Ian's looking up where it comes up, so let's wait for that, and then,
It's used in 4 places. I have 50, 61, 71, and 96, so we need to see where it's put in.
What, disturbance, is that what you're talking about?
yes.
Excavation and mining.
What were the sections there, Ryan? I'm sorry, what'd you say?
50, 61,
50, 61.
50's,
96 is enforcement.
excavation and mining.
Yeah.
61 is landscaping. 71 is soil erosion and sediment control.
I don't believe it says you need a permit whenever you disturb,
No,
No.
no.
Because
in
it's,
the context of other activities.
mm-hmm.
That's the excavation mining. Where it says it in
I
here.
don't even see it in 61. I'm sure it's here somewhere.
It disturbs in 61.
Hmm.
Not disturbs.
So we have three options, either all activities, all land preparation activities, or all land preparation or modification activities.
I would vote for the third one just because it's the most clear. But
It's only 4 words, so.
So just add modification? That's
All
where we
land
started, that makes you
preparation.
happy?
Yeah, where we
All right.
started, all land preparation or modification.
That's fine.
It is 9:01.
Could I just hit one?
Yes.
question?
The next one, drive-in, drive-through businesses.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm just looking at schedule of use, and maybe I'm seeing something wrong, but it's crossed out on the schedule of use. In other words,
Drive-in, I see drive-in, not drive-through.
you know, drive-in is crossed out completely, where it used to have a dash like allowed. Now it's just a bar across, so it's,
who took it
looks
out?
like we removed it from the schedule
Yeah,
of
who
use.
took it out? I guess.
For us, we're just looking at convenience store. It says no drive-in.
We're looking here, drive-in business.
Well, that's different, but here, it's, drive-in is still used. I couldn't find drive-through.
Well, drive-through was added there.
The reason we took out, I think, drive-in business is because it was not permitted.
Convenience store and,
No,
okay.
it says no drive-in.
Russell,
Okay,
we eliminated drive-in business because it's not permitted anywhere in the town. That's probably why we took it out.
You just took it
The
out.
schedule of
Rather than-
interestingly enough, I don't know if you bring this up, but I'm reading the definition, and up in the page, which patrons are not required to enter the building in order to be served solar project. I'm focusing on a solar product, including but not limited to, so that leaves it wide open. So Stewart's then falls under that definition. They sold gas without entering the building. Is that, am I reading that right?
Hence why you have to have this definition, right?
I mean, they're sold a product, they're not required to enter the building, and included but not limited to, so it doesn't, by not limiting it, you have other possibilities. So, I don't know. And if you look at,
So we're also saying, though, that in the schedule of uses, drive-in and drive-throughs are not allowed. Right.
Except in one,
in the handler special.
Drive-in, well, sorry.
Drive-in was not allowed. Maybe they are now, I don't know.
Right.
I don't have the current, the revised one. According to this plan, drive-in is not allowed anywhere.
I have it.
So my question is, and I'm just gonna be a hypothetical question, is how did 20-something years ago, how did Stewart's ever get passed? Because it's not, there's nothing that allows them in this town.
You had to be here, my
No,
friend.
I was well before my time in the
There's all
town.
kinds of people screaming about going to bring
It's a
drugs.
huge deal.
I heard
Drug-
prostitutes and drug dealers.
Yep.
And I will go on record as saying it's the best thing that ever happened in town.
I
I
was the
love
one who pushed to get them to change their hours, that got the hours passed through. I trust you, that was 3 hours,
It's
3.5
their number
hours.
2 store in the
It was a
county.
big deal.
Is it really?
Wow.
Well, somehow, it wasn't it was determined that Stewart's was not a convenience store, so it was allowed.
A farm store, well, I mean, Stewart's technically, they
It was
have
a,
a
it was a
farm.
retail market, I forget what the definition was, but
So what are we doing with drive-in, drive-through business?
Well, I mean, technically, the interesting thing is, I mean, then the gas station that they have is a drive-through type business, or because you're not entering the business, so.
Every business in town during COVID was a drive-in, drive-through business.
Yeah, that's true. Did we,
Except for they had curbside pickup.
Catherine, did you see
So
drive-in?
they're still
It's all crossed
Patriots.
out.
It's all
Yeah.
crossed out, okay. So we didn't change that.
No.
So we could throw in gas stations are exempt, but we've deleted gas station as a definition.
I'm gonna wait for the day when a municipal code enforcement inspector tries to say that Stewart's can't be there because it's a drive-through business.
Yeah, right.
This was crossed off recently. That was made before this was crossed off.
Right.
as scheduled use.
Mm-hmm.
So it didn't become a non-conforming use.
Well, but what makes Stewart's not a gasoline station is that they also have that market. They sell lots of other things. So that's,
Yeah, but
So-
that definition
gas
clearly
station
does
on the
say,
planet,
doesn't have to enter.
Definition says,
right.
is, and I wouldn't put every word down, but it says an establishment not required to enter, okay? Sold a product, they don't have to go in to put their credit card into the gas pump, including but not limited to. It doesn't
well,
limit, so it doesn't exclude it because it doesn't say what is included, but not limited to.
we could qualify the definition by saying that, gas stations are not included as, or something, I don't know, as drive-in, drive-through.
So my question is, having been
Businesses?
too young to care at the time when Stewart's was approved, did Stewart's receive a variance to be here?
I mean, listen, that's a change of use right off the bat. A change of
Special
use is
permit.
very difficult to get.
It's what the zoning law was at the time that it was approved.
Yeah.
We don't know how many changes have been made since then.
Mm-hmm.
You'd have to go
That's
back
true.
and find out what was in effect at that date.
So they're a pre-existing use,
Now they
whether it's
would be.
non-conforming now.
Well,
So,
they weren't pre-existing before the zoning.
Right,
law.
that was
I know,
your-
but what I'm saying is, are we going to change a definition now for
Oh,
something
now.
that's pre-existing in the
I
town?
see.
That seems,
I'm just curious how, I'm just still trying to, I guess, do the history.
The question would be, are we gonna have another gas station where it would be an issue?
Right. What do,
And the
what-
only area that it probably would be is
Hold on, guys,
9G.
I just want to hear Ray on this one, because I'm just,
Yeah.
for my own knowledge, I'm just curious. on
Yeah.
this.
We had 3 lawsuits brought to the town, and they were brought by all the residents in the Heritage Development Area,
Yeah.
saying that there were going to be prostitutes and drugs and all kinds of craziness. And it's full of state police, sheriff's people most of the time.
Yeah.
And we won all 3 lawsuits, and it took us about a year and a half to go through them all.
So they basically, they got a change of use on the property,
Yeah.
with the zoning, so it was able to get the change of use based on the court
Well,
cases.
yeah, I guess so. I mean, this is 20-some years ago. But you can actually ask Carol to look at the lawsuits, and you can see.
And
what-
really, I mean, when you look at it going back, it's been a benefit to our town.
Yeah, now if you tried to get rid of it, you'll have an uproar
Yeah.
over there because all the kids and parents need food, gas, and ice cream.
Most importantly, the ice cream.
So, do we need to change it at all? Leave it alone?
I just suggest to leave drive-through, because it's not used anymore.
yeah, so it just says drive-in business.
I'm good
Fine
with
with
that.
that.
Crossing off drive-through.
Yeah.
So I make a motion that we end order of business.
I second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried. Meeting adjourned. Thank you, Jerry.
I won't be here next